He sold his own baby for pocket change. Now she's standing in his lobby, holding the proof he swore would stay buried. Stay with me. If you'd been standing in the lobby of Powell Capital that Tuesday morning, you'd never forget the way she walked in, like a ghost stepping into her own crime scene. Nobody really paid her much mind at first. Why would they? She looked barely 23, maybe 24, just a young black woman with frizzy hair pulled into a puff, wearing a thrift store denim jacket over an old college hoodie. She clutched a small manila folder so tight, her knuckles turned white. It was the receptionist, Sandra, who'd been there since dial-up internet was a thing, who first felt something weird in her gut. The girl didn't ask for directions or say she had an appointment. She just stood there staring at the brass plaque on the wall. Walter Powell, founder and CEO. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" Sandra asked, her voice doing that warm mom thing that always calmed nervous interns. The girl didn't even blink. She pressed the folder to her chest and whispered, "I'm here to see Walter Powell." Sandra forced a smile. "Mr. Powell's in a board meeting, honey. Do you have an appointment? Maybe you'd like to leave a message. I'm his daughter." Sandra's smile fell like a dropped glass. She'd heard rumors over the years. Everyone had. Whispers about Mr. Powell's wild college days, about some baby no one ever really saw. But the old man's record was squeaky clean. Married his high school sweetheart, built an empire from scratch, gave to charity, got a highway named after him. The man was untouchable. So Sandra leaned closer, lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" The girl finally looked up. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "I'm his daughter. He sold me when I was a baby. Tell him I'm here to return the favor." And just like that, Sandra's hands went clammy. She buzzed the top floor. By the time the elevator doors whooshed open behind her, the girl was already gone. Upstairs, the boardroom reeked of stale coffee and arrogance. Walter Powell, 72, with perfect silver hair and $1 million Rolex peeking from under his cuff, was wrapping up a presentation about legacy and succession planning. His favorite words. He liked to say he'd built Powell Capital brick by brick. But everyone knew the real bricks were people he'd stepped on, lied to, or paid off. When his assistant leaned in to whisper in his ear, Walter waved her off, annoyed. "What is it, Tina? I'm busy. There's someone downstairs," she said, voice trembling. "She says she's your daughter." For a second, Walter's face twitched. Just the corner of his mouth. Then he chuckled. "My what?" "Your daughter, sir. She says you sold her. She's asking to see you. She left this." Tina slid the manila folder across the polished oak table. Walter just stared at it. It was stained, battered at the edges. Not the sort of thing that belonged in a glass tower like his. The folder felt like it weighed 50 pounds when he finally opened it. Inside, a single birth certificate, yellowed at the corners, creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. He read his name under father, his real name, before the lawyers changed it for branding. And next to that, a baby's name, Tracy Carter, black female. Mother, Angela Carter, no father's signature. Walter slammed the folder shut so fast the men around the table flinched. "Meeting's over," he barked, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Get out." Down on the street, Tracy sat on a bench across from the Powell Capital building, legs bouncing, eyes darting at every suit that came and went through the revolving door. She'd come all this way with just $20 in her backpack and a half-baked plan. She'd slept in a Greyhound station the night before because she couldn't even afford a Motel 6. She could still hear her foster mother's voice ringing in her head. "That man didn't want you then. He won't want you now. You're better off forgetting, Tracy." But Tracy couldn't forget. She had to see his face. The man who'd signed a piece of paper and tossed her life away like last week's trash. The man who'd made her feel worthless every time another family gave her back. A gust of wind blew a crumpled fast food wrapper to her feet. She didn't even notice. She just kept staring at the glass tower, repeating one word like a prayer. Justice, justice, justice. She didn't want his money, didn't want his name. She just wanted him to look her in the eye and know she'd survived. Walter's office was so silent you could hear the click of his pen cap. He sat behind his mahogany desk, staring out at the skyline like it could swallow his shame. 1,000 thoughts fought for space in his head. He'd buried that part of his past so deep even he'd started to believe it was just a college rumor. Angela Carter. She'd been a freshman. He'd been a senior with a fancy car and a new credit card. The baby wasn't his fault. That's what he told himself. She was the one who'd gotten careless. And when the baby came out dark-skinned, he panicked. His father's words still echoed in his brain. "This'll ruin you. Nobody wants a scandal. Get rid of it." So he did. A closed adoption. Money changed hands. Documents vanished. No paper trail, or so he thought. Walter felt bile rise in his throat. He slammed the folder shut, then threw it in a drawer like that would make her disappear all over again. But deep down, he knew. Tracy Carter was real. And she was here. Back on the bench, Tracy checked her phone. An ancient, cracked screen hand-me-down that barely held a charge. A single text from her best friend back in Detroit lit up the screen. "You okay? You sure you want to do this?" She didn't reply. Instead, she pulled out a dog-eared photo from her pocket. Her as a baby, toothless grin, a stranger's arm holding her tight. Her birth mother, gone before Tracy could ever ask why she didn't run. Tracy whispered to the picture, "Hang in there, Mama. I got this." Then she spotted him. A flash of silver hair by the revolving door. Walter Powell, flanked by 2 security guards in cheap suits. He was scanning the sidewalk like he expected to see a ghost. Their eyes met. Tracy felt her stomach drop. He looked exactly like the old photos she'd found on Google, except older, frailer, but still trying to wear that smug, king-of-the-world look. She stood up, clutching her folder like a shield. She took 1 step forward, and Walter turned his back. He barked something at his guards, pointed at Tracy, then climbed into a sleek black town car that was already idling at the curb. The doors slammed. The car lurched into traffic. Tracy ran, sneakers slapping the pavement, but the car just pulled away, its tinted windows swallowing him whole. She stopped in the middle of the street, chest heaving, horns blaring around her. People stared, but nobody moved to help. She watched the tail lights vanish, the taste of hot tears burning her throat. Tracy looked down at the folder in her hand, then back at the tower of glass that held his name at the top. If Walter Powell thought he could shut the door again, he had no idea who she'd become. She whispered to herself, "You can run, old man, but I'm right behind you." And this time, she wasn't going away. Tracy stood at that intersection so long the streetlights flickered on above her head. Cars swerved, horns honked. Someone yelled at her to get out of the road, but she didn't budge until her knees went weak. She sank down on the curb, backpack wedged under her, folder clutched to her chest like it might disappear if she let go. She'd come all this way to look him in the eye, and he ran, just like everybody else. She laughed, a dry, bitter little sound that caught the attention of a passing delivery guy balancing 3 pizzas on his bike. "You okay, miss?" he asked, slowing down. "Yeah," Tracy lied. "I'm great. Never better." The guy gave her a skeptical look but kept riding. Tracy's stomach growled so loud she wondered if he'd heard it. She hadn't eaten since a stale granola bar on the bus. $20 in her pocket wasn't going to stretch far in downtown Chicago. Her foster mom always said she had a bad habit of running head first into trouble without a plan. Guess she wasn't wrong. Tracy dug her phone out again. 3% battery. 1 text from Rhonda back in Detroit, buzzing on repeat. "Pick up. I swear, Tracy, you better not do anything stupid." She almost answered. Almost told her she was fine. But what was the point? Rhonda would just try to send her $50 she didn't have to spare. Tracy had done enough taking. She stuffed the phone back in her hoodie, zipped it up to her chin, and started walking. The cheapest room she found was at the Greenway Motel 3 blocks from the bus station. The sign buzzed overhead with a flickering neon Y that gave the whole place a horror movie vibe. Tracy didn't care. She slid her last $20 bill across the counter like it was covered in gold leaf. The man behind the bulletproof glass didn't even glance up from his tiny TV blaring a baseball game. "Cash deposit, too," he grunted. "I don't have a deposit." "No key, then." Tracy stared at him, eyes stinging. "Please, I just need a place for the night. I'll pay you in the morning, I swear." The guy sighed, scratched his scraggly chin. Then he jerked his thumb toward the lobby door. "No cash, no key. Rules are rules." Tracy wanted to scream at him. Tell him about the man in the glass tower who'd traded her for a wad of cash before she even had teeth. How she'd bounced from home to home like a bad check. How every new family smiled in the beginning, then called the agency when things got too hard, or when they had their own real kids. But what good would screaming do? He'd just see another broke girl begging for pity. She turned and trudged back into the street, backpack straps cutting into her shoulders. She found herself in a 24-hour McDonald's at midnight, sipping free water out of a paper cup and pretending to read old flyers taped to the wall. Across from her, a college kid in a Cubs cap was snoring with his head on the sticky table. A group of teenagers in varsity jackets argued over who was paying for their fries. Normal kids. Kids who probably never wondered why their baby picture albums didn't match their skin tone. Tracy pulled the folder out again. She flipped it open, tracing the faded birth certificate with her finger. Tracy Carter. Black female. Angela Carter's name was the only thing that felt like truth. Her mom had been 17, alone, and scared out of her mind. That's what Tracy's case file said. Angela tried to keep her, but Walter Powell's lawyers shut that down fast. She OD'd in a shelter when Tracy was 3. Nobody claimed her body for 2 weeks. Tracy felt a single hot tear slip down her cheek. She caught it with the back of her sleeve before anyone saw. She opened the second paper in the folder, the one she'd found tucked in her old case file. A typed list of payments. A signature at the bottom. H. Powell. Proof that he'd bought his silence. She didn't need his money. Didn't want his apologies. She wanted the world to know who he really was. It was almost 2 a.m. when Tracy finally gave up trying to keep her eyes open. She curled into the corner booth, hugging her backpack like a teddy bear. Nobody kicked her out. Not the cashier with the pink hair, not the security guard nursing a cold coffee at the door. She figured they'd seen worse. In her dreams, she saw her mom. Angela was young, face half hidden by a hoodie, eyes bright like Tracy's. She whispered something Tracy couldn't quite catch, something about staying strong, about not letting him win. When Tracy jolted awake, the sky was turning that pale gray of too early morning. The place was almost empty, except for a guy mopping the floor and the smell of burnt coffee. Tracy wiped drool off her chin, cheeks flushing. She glanced around, half expecting Walter Powell to be standing there, smug grin on his face, ready to offer her hush money in a tidy little envelope. But he wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. Cowards never showed up when you needed them to. She grabbed her folder, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and stepped out into the sticky dawn air. Walter Powell, meanwhile, hadn't slept a wink. He paced the floor of his penthouse condo, the city skyline mocking him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd spent decades building this life. Married the right woman, had the right kids. Nobody ever asked about the first baby. Why would they? But now she was here, flesh and blood, standing on his doorstep like a living testament to his biggest sin. His phone buzzed on the glass table. His oldest son, Nathan, was calling. Nathan, the golden boy, the one lined up to take over Powell Capital one day. Walter ignored the call. Nathan didn't need to know. Not yet. Instead, Walter scrolled through his contacts until he found the name. Brandon Madison, private security. He hit call. Brandon? Yeah, it's me. I've got a situation. Some girl. Says she's my daughter. Find out everything. I want to know where she's sleeping, who she's talking to, what she wants, and shut her down before she causes a mess. Walter's voice cracked at the end. He didn't like that. He was used to being the man with the plan. Brandon's voice was calm, cold. Understood. I'll handle it. Walter ended the call and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He gulped it down without tasting a drop. He had no idea Tracy had already seen the real him, and she wasn't about to shut up. By noon, Tracy found herself standing on the edge of a little league field in a neighborhood that made her thrift store hoodie feel like a neon sign. She'd followed an address scribbled in pencil on the back of her birth certificate, her mother's last known place. Now a cracked brick duplex with a for rent sign crooked in the yard. Next door, a cluster of kids in oversized baseball jerseys squealed and chased each other with sticky snow cones. She watched them, her chest tight. All those kids had parents in folding chairs, waving and cheering, yelling, "Attaboy," and "That's my girl." Tracy hadn't been to a game since her 4th foster home. Her mom, back then, used to drag her to her real son's games, made Tracy sit on the splintered bleachers, silent and invisible. Family was always for somebody else. She was about to turn back when she spotted a man standing near the chain-link fence, short, wiry, with a bushy gray beard and an old Cubs jacket. He was staring right at her like he'd been expecting this moment for decades. "You Tracy?" he called out, voice rough as gravel. Tracy stiffened. "Who are you?" The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a dog-eared photo. Her baby picture. The same one Tracy kept in her backpack. "I'm your uncle, kid," he rasped. "Angela's brother." "You really shouldn't be here." Tracy's heart hammered so hard she thought she might pass out. Before she could speak, the man grabbed her elbow and leaned in close, his breath hot in her ear. "He knows you're looking for him, and you're in way over your head." Tracy froze. The old man's fingers dug into her arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that she felt like a kid again, caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. She yanked her elbow free and took a step back, scanning his face for any hint of a lie. Same dark eyes as her mother's, same broad nose. He looked tired, the kind of tired you don't sleep off. "You're Angela's brother?" she asked, voice low. "Name's Ernest," he said, tucking the photo back in his pocket. "Ain't no one called me uncle in a long time." Tracy's mouth went dry. She'd spent half her life wondering if there was anybody left who remembered Angela as more than a statistic in a file folder. "Why didn't you come for me?" she blurted out, hating how small her voice sounded. Ernest sighed and looked away, watching the Little League kids scream and run the bases. One of the dads yelled, "Good hustle, Sammy!" and the bleachers erupted in claps. "I tried," Ernest said finally. "Didn't have no fancy lawyer money, no family court tricks. By the time I found out where they'd placed you, you were already bounced to another home. Then another. Next thing I knew, you were gone." He rubbed his eyes like they burned. A man can only push so long when doors keep slamming in his face. Tracy hugged her arms across her chest. "Well, I'm here now, and I'm not running. He's gonna see me, Ernest. He's gonna look me in the eye and—" Ernest snorted. "You think that man cares about looking you in the eye? He's a snake, Tracy. Always was. You're poking at a nest you don't understand." She squared her shoulders, lifting her chin. "I understand enough. He sold me like a bag of groceries. He needs to answer for that." Ernest studied her for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the sidewalk. "Come on, ain't safe to talk here." They ended up in a rickety diner 2 blocks away. Plastic booths, ketchup bottles sticky with fingerprints, an old jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the 90s. Ernest slid into a booth by the window. Tracy dropped her backpack on the seat and sat opposite him. A waitress in a faded uniform came over with a notepad. "Coffee?" Ernest grunted. "2, and keep it coming." Tracy's stomach flipped. "I don't have any money." Ernest waved her off. "Don't worry about that. You're family." The word felt foreign in her ears. Family. When the waitress left, Ernest leaned in close. "Look, I don't got much, but I know people, okay? Walter's got eyes all over. Money buys a lot of silence. Buys loyalty, too. You think you're the first one who's come knocking? There was another girl once. Said she had his baby. She disappeared. Just like that." Tracy felt her throat tighten. "So what? I'm supposed to crawl away and keep quiet? Let him keep pretending he's some big-shot hero while I'm out here sleeping in bus stations?" Ernest smacked the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. "I'm saying be smart. You want to get justice? You gotta be careful. That man's got lawyers, PIs, cops in his pocket. He'll bury you." Tracy pulled the birth certificate from her folder and laid it flat on the greasy table. "I got proof. My mom's name, his signature. That's enough." Ernest shook his head. "Enough for who? Papers don't mean squat when you're up against money like that." Tracy's jaw clenched. "So what then? Just drop it? Go back to Detroit and pretend I don't exist?" Ernest leaned back, eyes weary. "I'm saying maybe you don't gotta do it alone." Tracy narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ernest pulled out an envelope from his jacket, sliding it across the table. "This here's an old friend of your mama's. She knew things. Kept records. Might have even hid copies of stuff Walter thought he'd buried. She works nights at the county hospital. Name's Beatrice. If she's still got anything, that's your shot." Tracy stared at the envelope like it might explode. "Why now? Why help me now?" Ernest looked her square in the face. "'Cause you showed up. 'Cause I promised my sister I'd watch your back if you ever found your way home. And 'cause I don't want you ending up in a ditch." Tracy shoved the envelope in her backpack. I'm not stopping. He's gonna pay. I don't care what it takes. Ernest nodded once, then stood. I'm gonna walk you to the bus. This place ain't safe at night. They didn't make it half a block before Tracy felt it, that prickling on the back of her neck. She turned and spotted a black SUV idling at the corner. The window rolled down just enough to see a man in dark sunglasses, though the sun had long since dipped behind the skyline. Ernest noticed it too. Stay close. They picked up the pace, weaving through trash cans and busted fences behind the diner. The SUV didn't move at first, but Tracy heard the engine purr to life. Tires crunched over gravel. It crawled down the alley after them. Ernest grabbed her wrist. Go! Back fence! Now! They ducked into a narrow lot, chain-link fence half bent and rusted. Ernest boosted her over the top like she weighed nothing. Tracy landed hard on the other side, palms stinging, knees scraping on the concrete. Ernest scrambled after her, breathing ragged. Keep moving! That's Walter's guy! I guarantee it! They darted through another alley, out onto a side street. Tracy's chest burned like fire, but she didn't dare stop. Her mind spun. If he's already sending people after me, what else is he willing to do? They rounded a corner and came face to face with another black SUV, this one parked dead center in the street. A man stepped out. Big, square shoulders, neat buzz cut, no expression on his face. Tracy Carter, he said calmly. Mr. Powell wants to see you. Now. Ernest stepped in front of her, fists clenched. Back off, man. She ain't going nowhere with you. The man cracked a smile that never reached his eyes. I wasn't asking your permission, old man. Before Tracy could scream, the second SUV pulled up behind her, blocking the street. Two more men in suits stepped out, one with a walkie-talkie buzzing at his belt. Tracy's pulse hammered in her ears. She had a choice: run and maybe never get another chance, or get in that car and find out what Walter Powell wanted so bad he'd send goons to drag her off the sidewalk. Ernest hissed, "Don't you dare go with them!" But Tracy lifted her chin. "I need to see his face." She stepped forward. The man opened the back door like he was showing her into a fancy limo. Tracy caught Ernest's eyes, wide, desperate, and mouthed, "I got this." She climbed in. The door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. The tinted windows swallowed the world whole. As the SUV rolled away, Ernest stood in the street, helpless, his sister's ghost heavy on his shoulders. Inside the car, Tracy's hands trembled in her lap. She forced herself to breathe. One word thrummed in her mind: justice. She didn't know yet that Walter Powell's idea of a meeting would be more than she ever bargained for. The SUV smelled like stale cologne and new leather. Tracy sat wedged between the locked door and a bodyguard with arms like tree trunks. Across from her, the buzzcut man who'd invited her aboard tapped at his phone like she was invisible. Nobody spoke. Nobody offered her so much as a bottle of water. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as they cut through traffic. Tracy's legs bounced like they had a mind of their own. Her heartbeat drummed so loud she wondered if the driver could hear it. She clenched the folder in her lap until her knuckles ached. Every block they rolled deeper into the night, she told herself the same thing. He doesn't get to scare you. Not this time. Not ever again. When the SUV finally stopped, Tracy braced for some marble lobby, another corporate fortress where they'd hustle her through a private elevator. But instead, the door opened onto a sleepy stretch of old warehouse district. The building was low and square, with blacked-out windows and a dented metal door. It looked like someplace teenagers might sneak into for a fight club, not the meeting spot for a billionaire. Out, the buzzcut man said flatly. Tracy hesitated just long enough for the guard beside her to grab her elbow. His grip was hard, but not bruising. Not yet, she thought bitterly. Inside, the air smelled of industrial cleaner and something darker, oil, or maybe mildew. Bare bulbs flickered overhead. The only sound was her sneakers squeaking on the concrete floor. They led her down a narrow hallway. She spotted a stack of old shipping crates stamped with Powell Capital's logo, a cruel reminder that even when he hid in the shadows, Walter Powell still left his mark on everything. At the end of the hall was a door half open, warm light spilling out. The guard pushed her through, then shut it with a heavy thunk. Walter sat alone at a folding table that looked out of place in the middle of the dingy warehouse office. He was still wearing that perfect silver hair, tailored suit jacket draped on the back of his chair. But up close, Tracy saw the cracks, the slight tremor in his hand, the deep lines around his eyes. He didn't stand, didn't say her name, just gestured at the metal chair across from him. Sit. Tracy dropped her backpack on the floor and sat, crossing her arms over her chest like armor. They stared at each other. Tracy tried to match his coldness, but her blood boiled. Walter cleared his throat. You shouldn't have come here. Tracy barked a laugh. Sorry. The sign outside didn't say, "No unwanted children allowed." A muscle twitched in Walter's jaw. You don't understand what you're doing. Try me. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. You think showing up with a faded birth certificate is going to ruin me? You think the press will care? They'll spin it as some desperate girl's money grab. You'll be nothing but a tabloid punchline by tomorrow. Tracy slammed her folder onto the table so hard the papers spilled out. You signed me away like garbage. You made my mother beg for scraps while you played golf with politicians. And now you think I want your money? She shoved a photo at him. Angela holding baby Tracy, her eyes tired but defiant. She was 17. You let them chew her up, then you left her to die. And you want to lecture me about consequences? Walter's gaze flicked to the photo, then back to Tracy. If it shook him, he didn't show it. Angela was a mistake, a youthful indiscretion. I made sure you'd have a better life. Tracy's laugh was sharp and humorless. Yeah? A better life in 10 foster homes? Hungry half the time? Sleeping with one eye open so the next dad wouldn't creep in my room? She leaned forward, voice low and venomous. Your idea of better nearly killed me. Walter drummed his fingers on the table. So what is it you want? A check? A house? A seat at the company board? Tracy gaped at him. I want you to stand up in front of all those smug suits you lied to and tell the truth. I want your perfect white-collar world to see the girl you threw away. I want them to choke on it. Walter snorted, a mirthless little puff of air. You think people care? I own half of this city's power brokers. You'll be painted as a liar, a con artist. Your life will be torn apart. The people you love, they'll get dragged through the mud, too. Tracy felt the heat rising in her face. Try me. I've been dragged through worse. And you? You'll be a joke. Walter's eyes hardened. He leaned forward, voice suddenly like ice. You're bluffing. You don't have the stomach for this. Tracy's chin lifted. Watch me. The door swung open so fast it banged the wall. The buzzcut man stepped in, whispered something in Walter's ear. Tracy strained to catch a word, but all she heard was earnest. Walter's face twitched. Handle it. The guard nodded and slipped back out, the door closing softly behind him. Tracy's heart seized. What did you just do? If you touch him. Walter cut her off, voice measured, almost bored. Your uncle should have stayed gone. He's not your savior. Tracy shot up, palms braced on the table. If you hurt him, sit down, Walter snapped, the mask slipping for just a second. You want to play grown-up? Then understand. You're poking at things that can't be put back in the box. You think this is about you? It never was. Tracy felt something shift in her gut. What does that mean? Walter cracked a humorless smile. It means you're not the only skeleton in my closet. And if you force my hand, you'll drag out worse than you can imagine. Tracy's mind spun. What was he hiding? Another baby? More money buried somewhere? She forced her voice steady. You're bluffing. You're just a scared old man who finally got cornered. Walter leaned in, so close she caught the faintest whiff of his cologne. Something expensive, cloying, like he'd sprayed it over rot. You think you've cornered me? He hissed. You're a broken branch on a tree I pruned decades ago, and you have no idea how deep these roots go. Tracy stared him down, the folder clutched in her shaking hands. She had proof. She had her mother's ghost at her back. But something about the glint in his eyes made her stomach twist. Before she could speak again, the door swung open. This time, the buzzcut man's shirt was splattered with something dark. He looked at Walter, voice calm as ever. It's done. He won't be bothering you again. Tracy's knees buckled. What did you do? She screamed. Walter rose, cold and towering over her. You wanted to see who I really am, Tracy. Now you know. He turned to the guard. Take her to the hotel. Make sure she remembers who's in control. As they grabbed her arms, Tracy fought like a wildcat, her screams echoing through the empty hall. In that moment, one thing burned brighter than fear in her chest. She'd make him pay, even if it killed her. Tracy's head slammed against the SUV's window every time they hit a pothole. She pressed her cheek to the cold glass, trying to focus on the city lights blurring by instead of the iron grip of the guard's hand on her wrist. Her thoughts spun like a busted record. Ernest. What did they do to Ernest? She'd known the man all of 2 hours, but he was the only one who'd said family like it meant something. And now he was, what, dead? Missing? Dumped somewhere in a back alley like an old mattress? The SUV veered off the highway and rumbled down a side street. The driver didn't speak. The buzz-cut man, Brandon, she finally caught his name, scrolled his phone like he was ordering pizza instead of kidnapping her. Finally, they pulled up to a big fancy hotel near Millennium Park, all glass doors and bellhops in red jackets, a place Tracy would have just stared at through the bus window any other day. Brandon leaned over her. His breath smelled like stale coffee and menthol. No funny business. You stay here, keep your mouth shut, and you'll be out of Chicago by sunrise. Tracy bit down the taste of bile. Where's Ernest? Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Didn't your mama ever teach you? Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. He snapped his fingers. The guard yanked her out of the car like she weighed nothing. Inside the lobby, the marble floors and fake smiles of the front desk felt like another world, a world that would never belong to her. They shoved a keycard into her palm, along with a single duffel bag she didn't recognize. Room 1207, Brandon said. Use the card, take a shower, get some sleep. Car picks you up at 5 a.m. You vanish. Simple. Tracy's eyes narrowed. And if I don't? Brandon's face turned to stone. Then maybe what happened to your uncle happens to you. He leaned in so close she smelled the sweat on his collar. You think you're tough. You're not. You're alone, kid. Always have been. Tracy didn't flinch. She turned on her heel and headed to the elevator, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. But inside, every muscle in her chest felt like it might snap. The hotel room looked like something off a real estate show. Crisp white sheets, giant windows, overpriced minibar snacks that cost more than her entire bus ride from Detroit. Tracy tossed the duffel on the bed and tore it open. Inside, a cheap flip phone, a change of clothes, department store tags still on them, and a sealed envelope with her name scribbled on it in block letters. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Tracy, you can take this as a chance. Get out while you still can. I don't want to ruin you. You have enough money in this envelope to start over somewhere. New city, new name, clean slate. Or you can stay and watch everything you think you know burn to the ground. Your choice. H.W. She dug into the envelope. A thick stack of hundreds. Blood money. Tracy hurled the envelope across the room. Bills fluttered like confetti, landing in a pile at her feet. She caught her reflection in the glass window. Baggy hoodie, eyes rimmed red. The folder from her backpack clutched like a lifeline. They'd try to buy her silence, just like they bought off every lie before. Just like they bought her mother's fear. Not this time. She dropped onto the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through her cracked screen for Rhonda's number. Her best friend would pick up. Rhonda always did. But the phone screen flickered and died. 0 battery. No charger. Tracy hurled it onto the bed and let out a ragged laugh. Of course. She was alone again. Or maybe not. She dug Ernest's envelope out of her bag, the one with the address for Beatrice, the hospital night nurse who supposedly kept records Angela had hidden away. Tracy's pulse quickened. Beatrice could be the crack in the wall Walter had spent decades building. She just had to get to her. Tracy slipped on the new clothes. Jeans too big, sweatshirt that smelled like department store plastic, and stuffed the cash in her backpack. Let Walter think she'd run. Let him think he'd won. She crept into the hallway, quiet as a mouse. No sign of Brandon or his bulldog goons. She made it to the service stairs and hustled down 12 flights, lungs burning. Out the back door into the cold Chicago night. She made it 3 blocks before her feet were screaming. She ducked into an all-night Wendy's, practically hugging the smell of cheap burgers and hot fries. She hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. She dropped her last honest $5 bill on the counter. Junior cheeseburger, no onions, small fry, small Coke. The kid behind the counter raised an eyebrow. Rough night? You don't know the half of it, Tracy mumbled. She tucked into the corner booth, devouring the fries like she hadn't tasted salt in weeks. She tried not to think about Ernest, about how his photo, Her baby photo was probably crumpled in some alley. Halfway through her burger, she noticed a man at the counter. Old windbreaker, grizzled beard. He was watching her like a hawk. Tracy's chest went tight. She grabbed her backpack, eyes darting for the door, but the man shuffled over before she could move. "You Tracy Carter?" he rasped. She stiffened. "Who's asking?" He dropped into the booth across from her, ignoring her flinch. "Name's Joe. Used to work with Beatrice. She sent me, said you'd come looking." Tracy's mouth went dry. "How did you—" He cut her off, voice low. "Walter's people are sniffing around the hospital. Beatrice don't trust phones. Said to get you someplace safe." Tracy's heartbeat thudded in her ears. She wanted to believe him, but nothing felt safe anymore. Joe leaned in, eyes sharp under his shaggy brows. "You want to bury Powell? You better hurry. Girl like you? You're on borrowed time." Tracy swallowed the lump in her throat. "Where's Beatrice?" Joe cracked a grin. "You ever been in a church basement at 3 a.m.? Come on, kid. Grab your burger. We got work to do." Tracy wrapped the greasy paper around her half-eaten burger, her mind spinning. If Ernest really was gone, Beatrice was her last shot. But something about Joe's crooked smile made her stomach twist. She stood up anyway, slinging her backpack on her shoulder. She'd come this far. She couldn't back down now. As they stepped out into the freezing wind, Tracy glanced back at the Wendy's sign, flickering behind her. One last taste of normal. Because whatever waited in that church basement, she knew normal was gone for good. Tracy followed Joe through streets that looked like the city had given up on them years ago. Cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and boarded-up storefronts covered in layers of peeling posters. Her sneakers scuffed against loose gravel as they ducked behind an abandoned laundromat. Joe kept glancing over his shoulder every few steps, like he expected Walter Powell's goons to pop out from behind a dumpster at any second. Tracy wished he'd stop. Every shadow looked like a threat now. They finally reached an old brick church with a faded sign that read, Mount Zion Gospel Fellowship. The stained glass windows were grime-covered, and weeds pushed through the steps like they were trying to reclaim the whole building. "You sure about this?" Tracy asked, hugging her backpack close. Joe didn't answer. He pounded on a side door 3 times, then twice more in quick knocks. A tiny metal slot slid open, and a pair of watery brown eyes squinted out. "Joe?" A raspy voice croaked. "Yeah, it's me. Let us in, B. She's with me." The slot slammed shut. Tracy heard the scrape of a heavy deadbolt. Then the door swung inward to a waft of warm air smelling faintly of burned coffee and something floral. Maybe lavender soap. Beatrice was older than Tracy expected. She had hair cropped close and dyed a soft purple at the tips, skin the color of dark caramel, and deep laugh lines etched around her eyes. Though she wasn't smiling now. She ushered them inside, her eyes darting down the empty alley before slamming the door and bolting it again. "Lord, child," she breathed, taking Tracy's face in her hands like she was inspecting a wound. "You look just like your mama when she was your age. God rest her soul." Tracy didn't know whether to cry or scream. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You knew my mother?" Beatrice nodded, guiding her into a small side room just off the old fellowship hall. It looked like an emergency shelter. Folding chairs stacked in one corner, a mismatched couch covered with crochet blankets, and a battered coffee pot sputtering on a hot plate. "Sit," Beatrice ordered. "We don't got much time." Tracy dropped onto the couch, the old cushions swallowing her whole. Joe hovered by the door, one eye on the dark hallway like he was waiting for ghosts. Beatrice shuffled through a filing cabinet wedged under a sagging shelf lined with dusty hymnals. "Your mama? She trusted me back then. She knew something stank about what Walter's people did. She kept copies, receipts, letters. I hid 'em after she passed, just in case you ever came looking." Tracy's breath caught. "You really have them?" Beatrice shot her a look over her glasses. "Honey, you think I risked my job at that hospital for 20 years for nothing? You ain't the first person Walters tried to scare off, but he don't own everybody." She dropped a ratty manila envelope in Tracy's lap. Tracy's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers, old handwritten notes in Angela's neat scrawl, details Tracy had never seen in her file. One paper made her breath hitch. A signed receipt showing a cash payout to a private adoption agent. Walter's name right at the bottom. "This," Tracy whispered. "This is what I need." Beatrice nodded, voice soft but fierce. It's a start. The truth don't fix everything, baby girl, but it's a crack big enough to shine light through. Joe crossed his arms, his voice rough as gravel. Walter's got eyes everywhere. We're gonna have to move you. I got a cousin downstate, truck driver, owes me a favor. He can get you out till you're ready to drop this bomb. Tracy's shoulders stiffened. No, I'm not running, not again. He thinks he can scare me off, kill my uncle. I'm not letting him bury the truth a second time. Joe and Beatrice exchanged a look that made Tracy's skin prickle. Beatrice perched next to her on the couch. Child, you brave, but you gotta be alive to see this through. This ain't no hero movie. You poke a beast like Powell without a plan, you disappear. Tracy's mind raced. Ernest was gone. The cops wouldn't listen. They'd just brush her off as some unstable girl with a grudge. But the media? Maybe, just maybe, they'd care if they saw the real receipts. She thought about Rhonda back in Detroit, the friend who'd always told her to stand up, even when the world called her nothing. Tracy straightened her back. I'm going public, she said, voice shaking but sure. News station, local papers, whatever it takes. If I stay quiet, he wins. If I run, he wins. I'd rather die than let him win. Beatrice exhaled, shoulders sagging. Lord help us all. They spent the next hour hunched over the tiny folding table, Tracy scribbling down names and dates she remembered from her case files, while Beatrice fed her stale cookies and terrible instant coffee. Joe hovered by the window, peeking through the blinds every 5 minutes. Halfway through listing her foster homes, Tracy heard the first rattle, like a truck backfiring in the alley. Then a louder thud. Joe tensed. Shh! Another slam. This time, the side door. Heavy footsteps. Voices, muffled but close. Beatrice's face drained of color. How'd they find us so fast? Joe pulled a switchblade from his coat. Small, more bluff than weapon. He planted himself in front of Tracy. They ain't taking her. Tracy felt her heartbeat in her teeth. We have to hide the papers. Beatrice grabbed the envelope and stuffed it inside the old coffee canister on the shelf. They won't look here. It's just junk. The door banged again, louder, closer. A single voice boomed through the hallway. Tracy Carter, this is your last chance. Open up. Joe turned to Tracy, eyes fierce. You trust me? Tracy nodded. She didn't have a choice. Run, he hissed. Out the back, through the kitchen. I'll stall 'em. Beatrice pressed a faded photo of Angela into Tracy's palm. Your mama was braver than she ever knew. So are you. Now go. Tracy bolted, heart hammering so hard she thought it might rip out of her chest. She dove into the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, her shoes skidding on greasy linoleum. Behind her, she heard the front door crash open. Heavy boots, shouts. She didn't look back. She burst out the back door into the freezing alley. Trash bins, chain-link fences, the buzz of the street beyond. Freedom, if she could get there. Tracy clutched the photo in her pocket like a lifeline. She didn't see the shadow step out from behind the dumpster. A hand clamped around her arm, yanking her back so hard her breath whooshed out. She slammed into the wall, her vision swimming. A voice, low and familiar, rasped in her ear. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Brandon's face loomed in the dim light, his grip bruising her shoulder. Tracy's knees buckled, but the fire in her chest didn't flicker out. She glared up at him, voice raw. I'm not quitting, not ever. Brandon's grip dug into Tracy's shoulder so hard she thought she felt bone grind against bone. Trash cans clattered behind them as she twisted, trying to yank free, but he just shoved her harder against the cold brick wall. The church's basement door banged shut somewhere behind them. Whoever was inside had no idea she was out here. Cornered. You're making this real difficult, Tracy, Brandon hissed, close enough that his breath prickled her ear. You could have taken the money, flown off to some little beach town, started over. But no, you gotta play hero. Tracy sucked in a lungful of freezing night air and spat it right back at him. You killed my uncle. You think I'm gonna run now? Brandon laughed. A sharp, nasty bark that bounced off the alley walls. Kid, I didn't do anything you didn't ask for. You wanted to poke the lion? Now you're getting the teeth. He yanked her forward by her elbow, half dragging her across the alley. Tracy's sneakers scraped the pavement, her backpack bouncing against her hip. She fought the urge to scream. This was the part her foster mom always warned her about. Scream, and no one comes. Fight, and they just hit harder. But Tracy wasn't 10 years old anymore, and she wasn't going to make it easy for them. When Brandon reached for the back door of a black SUV, Tracy twisted hard, slamming her knee into his shin. He grunted. Not enough to let go, but enough to loosen his grip. She shoved her elbow back, caught him square in the ribs. For half a heartbeat, she thought she'd done it, that she'd break free and run. But Brandon slammed her against the SUV so hard her breath whooshed out. "You got spirit, I'll give you that." He jerked the door open and half-tossed her inside. Tracy's shoulder smacked the armrest, pain flashing bright behind her eyes. The folder with Beatrice's papers dug into her ribs. She'd stuffed it under her sweatshirt, right above her jeans. Brandon climbed in beside her, door clicking shut. The driver up front didn't say a word. He just pulled away from the curb like they were on their way to drop off dry cleaning, not hauling off a girl with a target on her back. They drove in silence. Tracy's ears rang with her own heartbeat. She forced herself to breathe slow, to keep her hands still so Brandon wouldn't see the tremor. Outside, Chicago rolled by. Corner stores, bus stops, a billboard for a new Powell Capital development that made her want to throw up. Finally, Brandon spoke. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you." "Almost." Tracy stared straight ahead. "Why?" "'Cause you think you're winning." Brandon smirked. "'Cause you don't understand what you're up against. Walter Powell didn't get to where he is by letting some stray ruin him." Tracy met his eyes, steady. "He didn't count on me surviving." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, you're about to learn a lesson about survival." The SUV slowed, pulling into the underground garage of a building that looked like every other glass and steel fortress in Powell's empire. As the garage door rumbled shut behind them, Tracy's stomach knotted. They weren't taking her to the fancy boardroom this time. No more polite threats over coffee and silk ties. This was the basement, and basements never meant good news. They hauled her up 3 concrete steps and through a steel door into what looked like a storage level. Half-finished walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead, the smell of stale air and damp concrete. Walter Powell was waiting. He stood there in his immaculate suit, hands in his pockets like he'd just come from a charity gala. Tracy's eyes flicked to his hair, perfect as ever. Not a single strand out of place. She hated him for that. Hated him for looking calm, while her entire body felt like it might crack open from the inside out. Brandon gave her a shove. She stumbled forward but didn't fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Walter let the silence stretch, studying her like she was a stray dog tracking mud on his marble floors. "You really are your mother's daughter," he said finally. Voice so casual it made Tracy's skin crawl. Angela never knew when to quit either. Tracy shot him a glare that could have burned holes through glass. "Don't you say her name?" Walter clicked his tongue, almost like he pitied her. "You think waving around old papers is going to bring her back? You think the world cares that you existed once upon a time?" He stepped closer. Tracy smelled his cologne, the same one from the warehouse. It made her stomach roll. "You've had your fun, Tracy. Now you're going to take what I give you, the money, the freedom, and you're going to disappear. Because if you don't," he gestured toward Brandon, who cracked his knuckles like he'd been waiting for this moment all night. Tracy squared her shoulders. "Or what? You'll bury me like you did my uncle?" Walter's eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of anger cracked his polished facade. "Ernest was a problem I handled. He stuck his nose where it didn't belong. You don't want to be another problem." Tracy's pulse pounded in her temples. She reached for the folder under her sweatshirt, her fingers grazing the edge. She didn't get a chance to pull it out. Brandon lunged. One hand clamped around her wrist, the other snatching the folder free. He flipped through the papers, his grin spreading. "Aw, look at this." Little Tracy thought she was Woodward and Bernstein. He held the folder out to Walter, who took it with a smirk. "Thank you, Tracy. I'll be sure to put this somewhere safe." Tracy's mind raced. No, not like this." Walter turned to her, voice low and final. "We're done here. Take her back to the hotel. Put her on the next bus out of the city. If she tries to come back, you know what to do." Brandon nodded. "With pleasure." He grabbed Tracy's arm again, yanking her toward the door. But Tracy wasn't done. She sucked in a shaky breath and spat out the last weapon she had. "You think you've got it all locked up, old man? I made copies. Beatrice has more. You can't hide this forever." Walter's eyes met hers. For the first time, Tracy thought she saw something. Fear, or just annoyance. But then he smiled. Cold. Crooked. Like he'd heard it all before. I don't need to hide it forever, Tracy. I just need to outlive you. Brandon shoved her through the door. Tracy's sneakers scraped the concrete, the weight of the night pressing down so hard her bones felt hollow. As the steel door slammed shut behind them, Tracy clenched her fists so tight her nails cut into her palms. She might have lost her proof, but she hadn't lost her voice, and she was done running. Tracy barely felt the cold wind whipping across her face as Brandon muscled her back to the SUV. Her mind was spinning so fast, she thought she might hurl right there on the oil-stained garage floor. They'd taken the folder, the receipts, the handwritten notes, all gone. Her mother's last proof just snatched up like it was nothing. But Walter Powell's last smug line burned hotter than the panic. I just need to outlive you. They thought they'd won. But Tracy knew one thing for sure. Dead or alive, she wasn't letting them bury the truth. Brandon pushed her into the back seat so hard her shoulder slammed into the door. He climbed in after her, that same dead-eyed look on his face like he was squashing a mosquito instead of a human being. Don't try anything stupid this time, he said, snapping a zip tie around her wrists. The plastic bit into her skin, so tight she could feel her pulse against it. I don't have to, Tracy shot back, her voice hoarse. I already won. Brandon barked a laugh. Sure, kid. Keep telling yourself that. The SUV pulled out of the garage and slid into the dead city night. Chicago's skyline glowed behind them, all glass and light and empty promises. Tracy stared at it, her jaw set so tight she thought her teeth might crack. The car rolled south for what felt like hours. Brandon didn't say a word. The driver hummed to some classic rock station turned down so low it just sounded like static. Tracy's shoulders cramped, her knees pressed against the seat in front of her, but she refused to squirm. She wouldn't give Brandon the satisfaction of seeing her scared. She closed her eyes, breathing slow, replaying Beatrice's words like a song stuck on repeat. The truth don't fix everything, baby girl, but it's a crack big enough to shine light through. Ernest was gone. The folder was gone. But Beatrice was still out there, and Tracy had seen the look in her eyes. That woman didn't scare easy. The car turned onto a dirt road, potholes rattling Tracy's teeth. They pulled behind an old gas station, one of those rusted-out places with boards over the windows and a busted neon sign that buzzed but never lit up. Brandon jerked his head at the driver. Give me a minute. The driver stayed put. Brandon opened Tracy's door, grabbed her by the arm, and yanked her out so fast her sneakers scraped across the gravel. He shoved her up against the wall of the gas station, one massive hand braced on her shoulder. His breath was rank, cigarettes and stale coffee, as he leaned in. You know what the real problem with you is? He sneered. You think you're the hero, but heroes don't win. Not against men like him. Tracy lifted her chin, eyes blazing. Better to go down fighting than crawl like you do. Brandon's eyes flickered, just for a split second, like she'd landed a punch. Then his grin came back, all sharp teeth. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to get on that bus at dawn. Your ticket's paid. You're going to sit your pretty little ass down and ride it all the way back to Detroit. And if I ever see your face in Chicago again, I won't be so polite. Tracy almost laughed. Polite. She'd seen friendlier pit bulls. She didn't move, didn't flinch. She just stared him down. You know what's funny, Brandon? She rasped. Guys like you think you're wolves, but you're just leashes for men too scared to get their own hands dirty. Brandon's fist slammed the wall an inch from her head, making the rotten wood crack. Tracy didn't even blink. Her heart raced so fast she felt it in her teeth, but she wouldn't let him see it. Brandon leaned in, voice low, seething. One more word, and I swear. A sudden screech of tires cut him off. Both of them whipped around. A beat-up blue sedan barreled into the lot, backfired, and skidded to a stop so close Brandon had to yank Tracy aside to keep from getting clipped. The driver's door swung open. A woman climbed out, short, squat, hair tucked under a knitted beanie. It took Tracy half a second to recognize Beatrice's unmistakable scowl. "Get away from her!" Beatrice barked, voice like a shotgun blast. Brandon's hand tightened on Tracy's arm. "You crazy old bat, you don't know what you're—" Beatrice lifted a finger and jabbed it at him. "You so much as breathe wrong and I'll bury you in every news station from here to New York. Try me." Brandon's grip faltered, just for a heartbeat, and that was all Tracy needed. She jerked her shoulder sideways, slipping free of his hand. Her wrists still bound, she stumbled toward Beatrice, who practically threw herself between them like a human barricade. Brandon took a step forward, jaw twitching. "You're making a big mistake, lady." Beatrice stood her ground, chest heaving. "And you're gonna regret underestimating this girl. She's her mama's child. And you know how that ended for you last time." Brandon's eyes darkened. He spat on the gravel, flicked Tracy a look of disgust, then turned back to the SUV. The car peeled out, tires screeching as it tore off into the night. For a second, all Tracy could do was stare at Beatrice, her knees threatening to buckle. "How did you—" Beatrice fished a box cutter from her coat pocket and sliced through Tracy's zip tie in one clean swipe. "Didn't think I'd let you run off into the dark alone, did you? I know how Powell plays. He's predictable." Tracy's shoulders sagged, the stinging plastic falling to the ground. She felt the burn of tears behind her eyes, but forced them back. Not now. Not when the night smelled like diesel and stale coffee and freedom. "You still got the photo?" Beatrice asked, voice gentler now. Tracy dug into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled picture of Angela, her mother's smile half faded by time. "Yeah, it's all I got left." Beatrice took Tracy's chin in her hand, forcing her to meet her eyes. "You got more than that, baby girl. You got me, and you got a story that'll tear him down, even if it's the last thing we do." Tracy's lips trembled. "He's gonna come for us." Beatrice cracked a grin that looked more like a battle scar than a smile. "Let him come. This time we're ready." They climbed into Beatrice's battered sedan, the engine rattling like an old shopping cart. As they pulled back onto the highway, Tracy stared at the faint glow of the city behind them, Powell's shiny glass towers shrinking in the rear view. She didn't know where they'd sleep that night, how they'd get the story out, or who'd even believe her. But one thing pulsed steady in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. The sedan rattled down a back road lined with busted streetlights and chain-link fences. Tracy hugged her backpack to her chest like it was a life vest. Beatrice kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping an offbeat rhythm on the dashboard. Neither of them said a word for miles. The only sound was the thrum of the tires and Tracy's pulse pounding in her ears. She stared at her reflection in the passenger window. Tired eyes, wild curls frizzing under the beanie Beatrice had loaned her. She looked nothing like the girl who'd stood in Powell Capital's marble lobby days ago, folder clutched to her chest like a sword. She looked like a fighter. She felt like one, too. "You okay, baby girl?" Beatrice asked, breaking the silence. Tracy let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "I don't know. I keep hearing his voice. Walter, saying he just needs to outlive me. He really believes that." Beatrice snorted. "Well, I'm older than dirt and still here. He don't get to write the ending. We do." Tracy's eyes flicked to the gas gauge. The needle hovered over empty. "Where are we going, anyway?" Beatrice's mouth curled into a grin that said she'd been waiting for this question. "To see an old friend. She runs a community paper on the south side. She don't scare easy, and she loves a good scandal, especially when it's got receipts." Tracy's pulse quickened. "The papers." He took the folder. Beatrice's grin widened. "Yeah, well, I ain't no fool. You think I'd give you the only copies? I've got more stash than he's got yachts." Tracy laughed, a choked, half-hysterical sound that surprised even her. "You really don't give up, do you?" Beatrice winked. "Your mama didn't raise no quitter, and she'd smack me upside the head if I let you run off alone." They pulled into a tiny gas station that looked straight out of a 90s road movie, flickering sign, dingy bathroom key attached to a hubcap. Beatrice dug through her purse for loose change, while Tracy stretched her legs. Inside, Tracy grabbed 2 coffees that tasted like burnt hope, a pack of stale powdered donuts, and a bottle of aspirin for the throbbing in her temple. She stood at the grimy counter, counting out every crumpled dollar bill she had left. The cashier, a bored teenager with a nose ring, glanced at her. "Long night?" Tracy snorted. "You have no idea." She stepped back out into the cold. Beatrice was leaning against the sedan, head tipped back, humming an old gospel tune. Tracy handed her one of the coffees. "For you. It's terrible." Beatrice cackled, taking a sip. "Perfect. That means it's working." They sat on the hood, the night pressing down around them like a heavy blanket. Tracy opened the donut pack, tearing off tiny bits just to feel the sugar melt on her tongue. "Do you think they'll believe us?" she asked finally. "The reporter, the people who read it." Beatrice's eyes crinkled. "Honey, they don't have to believe you at first. They just have to see you. Once the truth's out, it grows teeth. And then even Walter Powell can't shut it up." Tracy pictured Walter in his glass tower, barking orders, buying loyalty with fat checks signed with pieces of people's lives. She thought of Ernest's tired face, Joe's raspy voice, Rhonda's worried texts, and her mother's eyes in that faded photo, half smiling, half daring her not to quit. "Good," Tracy whispered, "because I want him to watch everything he built burn." Beatrice checked her watch. "Our contact's meeting us in 2 hours at her office. I know it ain't fancy. She runs her paper out of an old beauty supply shop. But she's good people. You got your story ready?" Tracy swallowed. "Yeah, I got it." They drove on, the city lights giving way to narrow streets lined with empty lots and corner churches. The paper's office was exactly what Beatrice promised, a half-renovated beauty shop with busted neon that still read, "Stills and Smiles." A crooked sign under it read, "The Southside Voice." Inside, stacks of old editions sat piled on mismatched chairs. The walls were lined with tacked-up photos, kids at block parties, old men playing checkers, protest marches, police cars and pastors. Real stories, not the glossy garbage Powell fed the world. A short woman in a track jacket looked up from an ancient Dell computer. Her hair was wrapped in a leopard print scarf, big hoop earrings swinging as she turned. She sized Tracy up with eyes that didn't miss a thing. "So this the girl?" she asked Beatrice. "This is Tracy," Beatrice said proudly, like she was presenting her own daughter. "She's got a story you're going to want to run front page." The woman, Marlene, according to the nameplate half buried under newspapers, crossed her arms. "Powell, he's got half the city on a leash. You got something real?" Tracy stepped forward, the photo of her mother in one hand, Beatrice's backup folder in the other. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. "I am the something real." Marlene's eyes glittered. "Good answer. Let's get to work." They huddled in the back room for hours. Tracy talked until her throat burned, about Angela, the closed adoption, the bounced foster homes, the hush money, Ernest, the threats. Marlene took it all down, her pen flying across yellow legal pads. When Tracy faltered, Beatrice squeezed her hand. When she forgot dates, Marlene pulled up old county records and mugshot databases on a laptop held together with duct tape. It was raw, messy, imperfect, but it was real. Outside, dawn crept in through the cracked blinds, pale and unforgiving. Tracy's head felt like it might float off her shoulders, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Marlene finally slapped her pen down and grinned. "Girl, this is the kind of story that gives rich men ulcers." Beatrice cracked open 2 flat cans of warm root beer. "2 ulcers," she said, clinking hers against Tracy's. Tracy laughed. The sound felt like the first real breath she'd taken in days. They were packing up when the bell over the shop door jangled. Tracy's heart stuttered. She peeked through the shelves, and her blood ran cold. Brandon, standing in the doorway like a bad dream, sunglasses perched on his head, a smirk twisting his lips. 2 other men flanked him. Heavy jackets, boots, the kind of guys you don't see unless they want you to. Marlene didn't flinch. "We're closed, boys." Brandon grinned, his teeth shark white in the flickering light. "I'm afraid Mr. Powell has some unfinished business with our friend Tracy." Beatrice stepped forward, fists clenched at her sides. "You're not taking her. Not again." Brandon's eyes glinted. "Funny how you think you get a say." Tracy's mind raced. She felt Marlene's fingers slip something cold and heavy into her hand. A burner phone, taped with a note. "Press send." Brandon took 1 step closer, boots thudding on the cracked tile. Tracy's pulse thundered. "This is it. Do you run? Do you stay?" She met Brandon's eyes, and for the first time she didn't feel small. She felt ready. Brandon's boots scraped closer across the cracked floor, echoing off the walls of the old beauty shop, like a drumbeat of doom. The 2 guys flanking him looked like they belonged on a wrestling poster, shoulders bunched under cheap black jackets. Tracy felt the burner phone slick with sweat in her palm, the little press send note burning a hole in her head. Beatrice stepped half in front of her, hands spread. You really think you can drag her out of here with half the South Side watching? Go ahead, Brandon. See how that plays. Brandon's smirk was sharp and hungry. You think anybody here's gonna care? Powell's been paying off church basements and neighborhood watch captains since before she was born. Marlene slammed her laptop shut so hard, the echo snapped like a gunshot. Wrong neighborhood, honey. We don't stay bought. Brandon shrugged. Doesn't matter. Mr. Powell's done being polite. Tracy's heart hammered in her ribs. She could see it in Brandon's eyes. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to shut her up for good. Maybe dump her in some abandoned lot with a nice fake note about how she ran away for attention. But she wasn't running this time. She pressed her thumb to the send button on the burner phone. Outside, there was a squeal of brakes. Headlights swung through the broken blinds like searchlights. Brandon turned, his smirk slipping just a hair. What the? Before he could finish, the bell above the door jangled again, and a pair of local cops in uniform stepped inside, hands hovering near their cuffs. Behind them, half the neighborhood crowded the sidewalk. Old men with coffee mugs, teens with hoodies pulled tight. Marlene's church ladies with rollers still in their hair. Word travels fast when the South Side voice makes a call. The lead cop jerked his chin at Brandon. Brandon Madison? You and your boys are under arrest for intimidation, assault, obstruction of justice, and whatever else our new friend Tracy here wants to add to the list. Brandon barked a humorless laugh. You kidding me? We're walking out of here. But Tracy stepped forward, lifting her chin. She held up the folder Beatrice had saved, the copies she'd smuggled in the glove box. Not this time. I want every last word on the record, and I want him to hear it from me. She pushed past Beatrice's outstretched arm and looked Brandon dead in the eyes. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. Tell Walter Powell he can spend every last penny cleaning up this mess. He'll die rotting in that glass tower with the world watching him drown in what he did. I'm not scared of him anymore. Brandon lunged. The cops grabbed him so fast he almost bit the floor. The two meatheads went quietly, too shocked by the crowd that had materialized like an army. Later that day, Tracy sat with Marlene at her battered old desk, the first rays of afternoon sun lighting up the photos on the walls. Block parties, rallies, kids holding up handmade signs. Real stories, Tracy thought, not the ones people like Powell buy. Beatrice hovered nearby, fussing with a fresh cup of gas station coffee she'd insisted on making, just right. You did it, baby girl, Beatrice said, voice thick. You really did it. Tracy looked down at the folder, copies of the adoption scam, the payout receipts, the hush letters, her mother's name, her name, finally together, where nobody could erase them again. You think they'll print it? Tracy asked Marlene. Marlene snorted. Girl, I'm gonna run this so Big Powell's fancy lawyers will choke on their own invoices. And if they try to bury it, we'll slap it on every bus bench from here to Milwaukee. Beatrice clapped Tracy's shoulder. You ready to live your life now? I mean, really live it. Not hiding, not apologizing for just being here. Tracy looked out the window. Kids were playing stickball in the alley, the same place she'd seen Brandon lurking the night before. Same neighborhood, but different now, like someone had pulled a veil off her eyes. Yeah, Tracy said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. Yeah, I'm ready. It took days for the story to ripple out, but once it did, it hit Walter Powell's glass tower like a sledgehammer. The Southside Voice's front page spread got picked up by every local channel. By the end of the week, big papers downtown were calling it the Black Daughter Scandal. People who used to nod and smile in Powell's boardroom now crossed the street to avoid being seen with him. Corporate sponsors vanished overnight. One by one, old skeletons tumbled out. Other payoffs, shady closed adoptions, secret hush funds. Lawyers lined up like sharks in a feeding frenzy. The same ones who'd protected him now sniffed blood. And Tracy? She didn't run. She didn't hide. She sat in the front row at the press conferences, folder in her lap, Beatrice's hand on her shoulder. When reporters asked how she wanted it to end, she looked straight at the camera and said, I want him to feel what it's like to lose everything. Like my mama did. No plea deal, no apology tour, no chance for redemption. When the feds finally cuffed Walter Powell at his penthouse condo, Tracy was standing on the sidewalk below with Beatrice and Marlene, eating fries from a greasy paper bag they'd grabbed at the Wendy's down the block. She didn't wave, didn't spit, She just watched him disappear behind tinted windows, a tired old man drowning in his own lies. For once, Tracy felt the weight lift off her chest. Not gone forever, but lighter. Real. Beatrice nudged her with an elbow. "What now, baby girl?" Tracy popped a fry in her mouth, savoring the salt and grease. She watched a little league team jog by, bats bouncing on their shoulders, parents clapping and laughing. She smiled. Not big, but real. "Now," she said, "now I live. And this time, nobody gets to sell her story.